A lot of folks really struggle getting huge tomato harvests. So in this video, I'm going to give you a practical guide covering all the do's and don'ts so that you can get mind-blowing results too. I'm Tony O'Neill and this is Simplified Gardening, where I show you how to garden in a simpler way. If you want that perfect garden to relax in or just want to grow your own nutrient-dense foods, then start now by clicking the subscribe button and the bell icon. Then click all to be notified each time I release new content just like this. If you're looking to grow tomatoes like the professionals, then make sure you stick with this video right to the end, because I have spent a huge amount of time cramming huge amounts of tips and advice right the way through this video. So let's get to it. The first thing we need to do is to choose the types of tomatoes we want to grow. And in order to do this, we need to understand the tomatoes' habits. Now, there are various types of tomatoes out there, such as cherry, grape, Roma, beefsteak, plum, even the hybrid F1s and heirloom tomatoes. Each of these types fall into one of two categories, either determinate or indeterminate. So let's take a look at each of these terms so there's no confusion over our tomato plants. Determinate varieties are compact. They are known as bush varieties and they typically grow to around 3 or 4 feet in height. Once the top bud has set, then this plant stops growing. They require very little by means of support, and because of this are really ideal for container gardening. Now, the fruit on these plants all ripen at the same time, usually within a week or so. Indeterminate tomatoes are huge plants and they can grow really tall, typically around about 6 to 8 feet. There are some varieties that can get up to 12 feet. Now, these plants can set, grow and ripen tomatoes right throughout the season until the very first frosts. And indeterminate tomatoes will, like I said already, they will set new fruit, they will grow this fruit and ripen it, and they get huge plants and carry huge amounts of weight. And because of this, they require a real sturdy support system, something like a tomato cage or good strong sturdy stakes. We now know what type of tomatoes we want to grow for our given space and what will suit better. So once we've had our seed delivered, we can get on with sowing our tomatoes. When growing tomato seeds, it's important to consider your last frost date. Think about sowing these around 6 to 8 weeks before that frost date, and then that will allow these tomato seedlings to germinate and grow a sturdy little stout seedling ready for planting out. And if you're growing your tomatoes in a greenhouse or polytunnel, then you can sow even earlier because the seedlings will be protected from the frosts. When sowing your seedlings, it's easy. Just fill a small pot or tray with a good potting soil or multi-purpose compost and give this a good watering and leave it to sit for a minute to drain. Then place your tomato seeds on the surface of this compost and cover them with a very fine layer of potting soil or vermiculite. And press this down with a piece of cardboard or another pot to make sure that those seeds are firmly seated into that soil and have made good contact. And then you can give the surface a light spray of water. Then simply place this into a south-facing window or even a greenhouse bench. But better still, if you have a propagator, provide some bottom meat and put it in the propagator, such as this Vitapod I'm using here. At this stage, it's really important to provide your seedlings with enough light because they require this light. Sometimes you'll notice your seedlings in poor lighting conditions growing really tall and spindly. This is known as leggy seedlings. Now, leggy seedlings aren't very good because the plant is stretching itself out searching for light, and it makes them tall and spindly, not short and sturdy like they should be. Ideally, we should consider using artificial lighting, such as T5 fluorescents, or even the more economical LED lighting units, such as this Spider Farmer one that I recently reviewed. I'd just like to say before I continue, check out the show notes below for all the links to all the videos and the products I mentioned within this video. As I've already said, lighting is really important because we don't want leggy seedlings. But with tomatoes, we can get a little bit of grace with the potting on method. As we sowed our tomatoes before the first frosts, we now need to give them a lot more room. So we need to plant them on. Now this is the perfect opportunity to sort out any leggy seedlings that we have. Tomatoes have the awesome ability of producing roots right up the entire length of their stem. Each of the hairs that you see on that stem has the potential of becoming a new root. So we can deal with leggy seedlings by planting them much deeper, right the way up to the cotyledon leaves. Now these are just your seed leaves. This in turn will allow you to make your leggy seedlings much sturdier, but we must get the lighting right after this. Whether you decide to plant your tomatoes outdoors or indoors, then we need to get the soil ready for the tomatoes. Now, tomatoes prefer a free draining, loose soil. Now, if you have clay soils or sandy soils, then you'll need to amend these by adding lots of organic matter such as compost. Tomatoes prefer their soils to be slightly acidic, just below neutral on the pH scale, so aim for a pH of around 6 to 7. Indeterminate tomatoes become huge plants and carry heavy crops. It's really important that the structures that we build to support them is capable of carrying the plant and its fruit. Now, there are lots of different types of structures that we could build, and some of them are as follows. Bamboo canes, strings, fences, trellises, even tomato cages can all be used to good effect, but this list isn't exhaustive. And I'm sure that if you look around the World Wide Web, you will see loads of other ways to support your tomatoes. But the important thing is that we need to get these structures in place at time of planting so that these plants can utilize those structures as and when they need them. Tomatoes need full sun to grow and to do their best. Temperatures between 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius. However, if temperatures get too hot, and I'm talking around 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius, then the tomatoes will stop growing. When sowing your seeds, aim for temperatures around about 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 to 27 degrees Celsius, and an overnight temperature of no lower than 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, or this could really affect your seedlings. Tomatoes use a huge amount of water, and it's imperative that we are able to preserve that and keep the root zone moist at all times. Now, I'm a firm believer in using mulch because mulch does a number of things, but lots of different mulches can be used for keeping that root zone moist. This will also help in combating blight, but more on that a little bit later. Now, there are various things that you can use for mulching your tomatoes, such as wood chips, compost, straw, leaf mould, and even hay, as long as you can guarantee it has no seed. Now, I really like rape straw because it's broken up into very small pieces, and this creates a blanket, which is really good for maintaining moisture. Now, another added benefit to this is that it prevents weeds from growing, and that makes the life easier for the gardener. And it also helps the tomatoes because they no longer have to compete for resources. I hope you're getting value from the video so far. If you are, go down and hit that subscribe button right now so that you don't miss future videos. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Determinate tomatoes don't really require pruning. That's because they're grown just like a bush. Now, these can be left to sprawl freely, you know, and grow in all sorts of directions, but the only time they really require pruning is if you're trying to prevent them from spreading into a walkway or a pathway. indeterminate tomatoes, however, should be pruned. Remove the suckers from the plant, and this will allow you to grow the plant as a cordon. Now the suckers grow new stems, if you like, between the leaf axil and the main stem, and by removing these it allows you to put the energy that would be put into these leaf stems into a new crop. Now, if you allow these suckers to continue to grow, eventually they would produce their own tomatoes. But the likelihood of having a long enough season to get those ripened as well as your main crop then is pretty low. So you really do need to remove those suckers. Once the plants have reached their desired height, then you can prune the top of the plant off. And this is usually done after the 6th or 7th truss is set. This allows the plant to put all its energy into producing and swelling the fruit, and later in the season ripening it. As we've already discussed earlier on, the temperatures play a huge part in the tomatoes' development, and if the temperatures get too hot, then they do not produce the blooms required to produce fruit. And even if they have produced the blooms and then it gets too hot, it will drop those blooms in a way to try and protect the tomato plant itself. Now, the pollination of the flowers is usually done by insects, and things like bees and hoverflies tend to pollinate these flowers, but the gardener has a part to play here too, because they can pollinate the crop in times when there's poor weather and not a lot of insect life about. Pollination by hand is very easy to do, but not only that, it's very effective as well. And one of the most simplest ways to do this is to get an electric toothbrush and place that toothbrush right behind the flower and vibrate the toothbrush. What this does, it vibrates the flower, which releases the pollen. Another method would be to use a Q-tip or cotton bud or even a child's paintbrush and to collect the pollen onto this and then place this on another flower's stigma, and this will pollinate the flowers too. So there are lots of different methods to use in which to pollinate the crop by hand, and you just need to find which method is best for you. Pollen's usually available between early morning and early afternoon, with midday being the best time. And hand pollination is effective if you do it for every 2 or 3 days to ensure pollination occurs. And you'll see this when the flower wilts and dies and the fruit starts to form behind it. Tomatoes use huge amounts of water in order to be able to develop and support large trusses of fruit. Now, we've already talked about mulching in a way to save water and not waste it. But another thing that we can do is when we're preparing the soil for our tomatoes, we can include a lot of organic matter such as compost or farmyard manure. This will act like a sponge and absorb that water and release it out into the root zone when it's required. Watering in the morning is much better too, because what this does is allows the plants to dry off throughout the day, and this will help with cutting down things like blights. Now, what you can do is water enough to make sure that that root zone is moist all day. Now, tomatoes typically require about 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week. For me, I like to use the top 2 inches of soil as a test, and I stick my finger in that 2 inches of soil, and if it's dry then it needs water, but if it's moist then it's got enough. Now, another way to ensure that that root zone stays moist for the whole time is to run drip irrigation underneath the mulch, and this will ensure that that root zone is totally moist throughout the day. Tomatoes are huge plants and they require adequate nutrition in order to be able to provide huge trusses of fruit. There are many proprietary brands of tomato feed on the market, but I like to use my own homemade comfrey tea for my tomatoes. It does really well, and I'll put a link for how I make that in the description below so that you can see how to do it yourself. But also you can utilize seaweed feed as well, which is fantastic for tomatoes. When you're feeding too, avoid high nitrogen feeds because this gives you huge amounts of foliage over the production of the fruits. And this is where the new gardeners get caught up because they use something like chicken manure pellets and wonder why they don't have huge crops of tomatoes. Now, using chicken manure pellets is okay in the early phases of tomato growth when you're looking to put the foliage on, but as soon as that first truss starts to form and the flowers appear, then you need to switch straight over to a high potassium and a high phosphorus feed. So something like the seaweed or the comfrey, like I've already mentioned. And an NPK of something like 6-24-24 would be fantastic for tomatoes during their fruiting stage of life. So that's a lot of it. And then you need to feed weekly as well to ensure that they get that nutrition they require. And you can keep feeding right the way up until the first frosts kill those plants. Talking about feeding while I'm here, this is a really important tip for you guys. I see all too many times on the internet where people are saying, oh, you've got to give Epsom salts to your tomatoes because calcium's really important, and that's why all these diseases like blossom end rot and things are killing the tomatoes and ruining the fruit. Well, let me just explain one thing here, guys. Don't be so quick to jump on that myth of, oh, well, you've got to get calcium for your tomatoes and otherwise you're going to get blossom end rot. 99% of the time, there is not a lack of calcium in your soil. So the Epsom salts, although it's very good, it may not necessarily be that. What you have to understand is that if you don't water regularly and you allow that root zone to dry out, all those very fine roots will wither up and they can then die off. And when they do that, the plant is unable to absorb the nutrients that's required for it to get the calcium. And that's when blossom end rot really sort of gets hold of the fruit. So don't be so quick to think that, oh, well, if I haven't got if I've got blossom end rot, then it's because I've got no calcium in my soil. There may be adequate amounts of calcium there, but the issue is you've been irregularly watering and the root zone is dying off. Now it will grow back, but what you can do in the meantime is use the Epsom salts and make a foliar spray and spray the leaves, and that'll get into the plant system much quicker because there's no point adding it to the ground because the root system can't take up what's already in the ground. And I hope, if nothing else, you take this one tip away for your tomatoes that will stop blossom end rot in its tracks. And one last thing before we move on. When you're preparing your soil, you can add something like blood, fish and bone meal to the soil as a balanced feed, and this will help to level off the feeding over a long-term period, and that'll good nutrition into that soil for your tomato plants. So as that fruit starts to develop and you've got to the point of the 6th and 7th truss and you've topped those plants, then it's time to consider allowing some better air movement around the plants. So we need to now remove all of the leaves right the way up from the ground level right the way to the very first truss of fruit. This does a number of things. Firstly, it allows that air movement to get around, it allows the sunlight to get in and ripen those fruits, and also it can stop pathogens from bouncing up off the floor during watering onto the plant's leaves, so it cuts down issues there as well. When harvesting determinate tomatoes, you can pretty much harvest them all at once because they all ripen at the same time. With indeterminates, that's a different matter. You need to harvest the tomatoes as each of them becomes ripe because they will ripen over the course of the whole season and those plants will continually refruit. You know when to harvest your tomatoes when it's reached its full colour, whether that's yellow, orange, red or even purple. There's so many different colours available these days, and they should be firm to the touch but shouldn't be too hard. If they're too hard, they may need a little bit longer on the vine to ripen. And then collecting your own seed. Now if you want to do this, then leave the tomatoes on the plant as long as possible until they're very soft. And at this stage you know that the tomato itself and the seeds inside are ripe. You can then just take this home, scrape out the pulp and seeds from inside the tomato and place them into a glass of water and leave this on a windowsill for a few days. You may see a mold form. That's perfectly normal as the pulp breaks down. You can then simply just wash these seeds off and place them onto some paper to dry and then store them in an envelope. Now, if you want to see how to do this, I have a video and a link will be in the description below. And something I get asked a lot is, can you change the taste of your tomatoes? Can you make them sweeter? And the answer for that is yes. Now, you can use something like bicarbonate of soda or baking soda, and this will be put into a water made soluble, and your plants be watered with that, and that's then taken up into the root system and into the plants. And what this does is it stops the tomatoes being so acidic, and that makes them sweeter for tasting. After harvesting your crop of tomatoes, I get asked all the time, can you compost the tomato plants? And a lot of people are worried because you may have heard the term that tomato plants are what's known as a dirty crop. And what this means is they contain blights, and people are worried that if you compost them, then put that compost back out onto your garden, that you're reintroducing the blight spores to your garden. Well, a lot of things in gardening are just myths, and this is one of them. Now, the composting process itself will kill the blight spores because blight spores need live tissues in which to survive. With composting, as long as it's done properly, you have no live tissue left. It goes out, it's all dead, so the spores can't live. So it's okay to compost the tomatoes in something like this. Now, I've been composting my tomatoes like this for the last 12 years and I've never had blight because of it. Now, talking of blight, that is just one disease, and there are lots of other pests and diseases that can affect your tomatoes. So let's take a look at some of those. Before I go into the pest and disease section, I just want to tell you that on my website I have a blog that covers more in depth on growing tomatoes. So I urge you to go and have a look at that, and the link will be in the description, along with a link for a pest and disease video that I did last year, and that is fantastic for helping sort out a lot of these. Now, in this video we're not going to cover all that because I've got those resources, but what we are going to do is have a look at what can affect you as far as growing your tomatoes. Now, the main pests of tomatoes are aphids, cutworm, flea beetle, hornworm and whitefly, and like I said, we've got those other resources for you to go into that, but they have a couple of other issues as well, and we're talking about diseases like blossom end rot, which we've already covered, and blight, which is one of the major issues for tomatoes, especially if you grow in a hot, humid environment. Blight is airborne, and we need to consider about allowing good air movement around our plants. By having air movement around the plants, it keeps the plants dry. As we've already discussed, they need that humidity. If you cram your plants together, then they sweat, and that allows a way for the bacteria or the blight to get into the plants. Now, they don't like dry leaves as such, so the drier you can keep your leaves, the better. So plant your plants about 2.5 feet away from each other to allow airflow. We've already talked about pruning the bottom leaves because this will stop water from splashing up, which could splash blight mold and spores onto the leaves, which would be another way for them to get involved. But also, the other added bonus here is that if you notice down the side of my tunnel, I've got windows the whole length of this tunnel, and that allows really, really good air movement. Consider your watering. We don't want to be watering and splashing the water up on the leaves because we want the leaves to be dry. Water in the morning, which gives those leaves a chance to dry out throughout the day. Even consider drip irrigation and then cover that with mulch, and then that way everything from the ground level up is going to be perfectly dry. And another added bonus tip for you here would be to put something like baking soda or bicarbonate of soda into some water and make a foliar spray. Now what this does is turns the leaves alkaline, and blights do not like alkaline leaves. I hope you've really enjoyed this video and that it's answered all those questions you've had about growing tomatoes. And I urge you to go down into the show notes below and take a look at some of those links, because there is so many other resources that I have around this subject that can really fill in any gaps here. And also don't forget to comment below, because we're still running that competition till we get to 100,000 subscribers, and there's a $50 or £50 or whatever currency you're using Amazon gift card, so that whoever winner is picked will get that gift card. If you've got value from this video, you can subscribe here. And the very next video you should watch is this one here, because this will give you 12 perfect tomato growing tips so that you can get that mind-blowing harvest that you've been wanting. I'm Tony O'Neill and this is Simplified Gardening, where I teach you how to garden in a simpler way. Don't forget folks, you reap what you sow. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.